I walked into that courtroom looking like a completely different man. My cheating wife had planned this day like a victory parade, cameras ready. Her lover by her side, my humiliation scripted down to the last detail. But when I stepped through those doors, her smug smile vanished. Because the broken man she expected? He died 6 months ago. I still remember the exact moment my world shattered. It was a Tuesday afternoon, completely ordinary, the kind of day that blends into all the others until it doesn't. I'd been on a business trip to Seattle, pitching our marketing campaign to a potential client. The meeting wrapped up early, and instead of spending another night in a sterile hotel room, I decided to catch the earlier flight home. I was actually excited, imagining the surprise on Valerie's face when I walked through the door 12 hours ahead of schedule. God, I was such an idiot. When I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Valerie's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't in the kitchen or the living room. I called out her name, got no answer, and figured maybe she was taking a nap. I headed upstairs to drop my luggage. That's when I noticed her laptop sitting open on the dining room table, screen still glowing. She never left it out like that. Valerie was paranoid about her devices, always closing everything, always logging out. But there it was, open, unlocked, practically inviting me to look. I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd just walked past it, gone upstairs, lived in ignorant bliss for whatever time I had left. But something pulled me toward that screen, some instinct I didn't even know I had. And what I saw there didn't just break my heart. It incinerated everything I thought I knew about my life. The messages were open, a chat thread between Valerie and someone named Preston Hartley. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the tone, the intimacy, the casual way they talked about their future together, about trips they'd take, about the house they'd buy once everything was settled. But it wasn't just an affair. If it had been just an affair, maybe I could have processed it, dealt with it like a normal person going through a normal betrayal. No, this was something else entirely. As I scrolled through those messages, my hand shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse, I realized I was reading a blueprint for my own destruction. Valerie hadn't just fallen in love with someone else. She'd been planning this, strategizing it, with the cold precision of a military operation. There were conversations with her divorce attorney, detailed discussions about how to maximize her settlement, how to position me as the villain in this story she was writing. And then I found the thread that made my blood run cold. Messages between Valerie and Preston, where they talked about me like I was some kind of joke, some pathetic character in their little drama. "He's so clueless," she'd written. I could probably tell him to his face, and he still wouldn't believe it. Preston had responded with a laughing emoji, and the words, "This is almost too easy." The guy's a complete doormat. They had pet names for me. The obstacle, the weight. My own wife. The woman I'd spent 7 years building a life with, had reduced me to nothing more than an inconvenience standing between her, whatever fantasy she'd constructed with this Preston guy. I stood there in my own dining room, staring at that screen, and something fundamental shifted inside me. The anger I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt this strange, crystalline clarity. Valerie thought I was weak. She thought I was blind, stupid, easy to manipulate. She'd built her entire strategy around the assumption that I'd crumble when she finally dropped the hammer, so that I'd sign whatever paper she put in front of me just to make the pain stop. And in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. I was going to let her think she'd won, right up until the moment I proved her wrong. The hardest part wasn't gathering evidence or moving money to protected accounts, or finding a lawyer who actually knew how to fight. The hardest part was pretending. Every single day for 6 months, I had to look Valerie in the eye and act like the fool she believed I was. I had to come home tired and defeated, let my shoulders slump, respond to her casual cruelty with nothing more than exhausted silence. And she ate it up. The more broken I appeared, the bolder she became, like a predator that's caught the scent of wounded prey. It started small. She'd mention Preston's name in passing, testing the waters, watching for my reaction. When I didn't bite, when I just nodded absently and changed the subject, she grew more brazen. Soon, she was staying out until midnight, coming home smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. not even bothering to hide the restaurant receipts from places we used to go together. She'd leave her phone face up on the counter, notifications lighting up with his messages, daring me to say something. I never did. I just made myself smaller, quieter, exactly what she expected. But while I was playing the part of the broken husband, I was building something else entirely. My lawyer Iris was a shark in a tailored suit, and she understood the game we were playing. We documented everything. Every lie Valerie told, every dollar she moved. Every time she brought Preston around our mutual friends and introduced him as her close friend. I had photographs, bank statements, recorded phone calls, where she coached people on what to say in court. In my state, single-party consent meant I could record our conversations legally. And Valerie, confident in my ignorance, said things that would bury her. 3 weeks before the divorce hearing, Valerie's campaign went nuclear. She didn't just want to divorce me. She wanted to destroy me. I watched as she gave interviews to local lifestyle bloggers, spinning stories about emotional abuse and financial control. She described a marriage that never existed, painting me as some kind of monster who'd kept her trapped for years. Her social media became a masterclass in manipulation. Carefully curated posts about finding herself again and escaping toxicity and choosing happiness. The comments poured in. Hundreds of people I'd never met calling me every name imaginable, telling her how brave she was, how strong, and then Preston joined the performance. He posted a photo of them together at some upscale restaurant. Valerie laughing at something off camera, looking radiant and free. The caption read, "Sometimes the best thing you can do is help someone find their way out of the darkness."
Oh.
My phone exploded with messages. Friends asking if I was okay. Colleagues growing distant and uncomfortable. My own mother called me in tears, having seen the posts, asking me if any of it was true. I wanted to scream the truth, to defend myself, to show everyone the evidence sitting in folders on my laptop. But Iris had been clear. We had one shot at this. If I revealed my hand too early, Valerie would adjust her strategy. So I stayed silent, let my reputation burn, and watched as the woman I'd once loved built my funeral pyre with lies. The day before the hearing, Valerie sent me a text message. I can still see it perfectly, every word seared into my memory. "Tomorrow, you'll learn what happens to men who waste women's time. I've made sure everyone will be watching. Wear something nice for the cameras. Not that it'll matter. By the time I'm done, you won't be able to show your face in this city again." She ended it with a smiley face emoji. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my apartment, the evidence spread out before me, and I transformed. New suit, fresh haircut. The broken man she'd been mocking for 6 months died that night. What walked into that courtroom the next morning would be someone she'd never seen before. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before dawn with a strange sense of calm. For 6 months, I'd been carrying this weight, this secret knowledge, playing a role that made my skin crawl every single day. But today, the performance ended. Today, the mask came off. I looked at myself in the mirror as I buttoned up the navy suit Iris had insisted I buy. The man staring back at me wasn't the defeated husband Valerie had been living with. He was sharp, composed, ready. I barely recognized him, and that was exactly the point. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes after Valerie, timing it perfectly. I wanted her settled, comfortable, surrounded by her people and convinced of her victory before I walked in. As I pulled into the parking lot, I could see them gathered outside the main entrance like it was some kind of premiere. Valerie stood at the center, wearing a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost $3,000 from our joint account. Preston had his arm around her waist, looking every bit the conquering hero in his expensive suit. Her parents flanked them on one side, her lawyer on the other, and there, not even trying to be subtle, was the journalist she'd invited. Notepad already out, documenting Valerie's carefully rehearsed sound bites about survival and new beginnings. I watched them for a moment from my car. Valerie was radiant, glowing with confidence, holding court like some kind of wronged princess finally getting her day of justice. She kept touching Preston's arm, laughing at something he said, playing the role of the woman who'd found true love after years of suffering. The small crowd around her, ate it up. I could see people nodding sympathetically, shooting disgusted looks toward the courthouse entrance like they expected me to slink in through a side door. Head down, drowning in shame. I stepped out of my car, and Iris appeared beside me like she'd been waiting. She looked like she'd walked out of a courtroom drama, all business in her charcoal suit, her expression unreadable. Behind her were three people Valerie wouldn't recognize. My accountant, carrying a leather briefcase thick with documents. Two former colleagues who'd agreed to testify. We looked like a legal task force, and that's exactly what we were. Iris glanced at me, gave the smallest nod of approval at my appearance, and said, "Ready to burn it all down? Let's go." The walk from the parking lot to the courthouse entrance felt like it lasted both seconds and hours. I could feel the exact moment Valerie noticed me. The laughter died on her lips. Her hand froze mid-gesture. I watched her face cycle through confusion, then recognition, then something that might have been fear flickering in her eyes before she caught herself. This wasn't the broken man she'd been living with. This wasn't the target she'd been mocking in her text messages. Preston's smirk faltered. Her lawyer looked up from her notes, eyebrows raising. The journalist's pen stopped moving. I walked past them without breaking stride, without acknowledging them at all, my eyes fixed straight ahead. No slumped shoulders. No downcast gaze. Just a man who knew exactly what he was walking into and wasn't afraid of it. I heard whispers start behind me, confusion rippling through the crowd. "That's him?" someone said. "He doesn't look like what she described." Another voice. "Did you see his lawyer?" And then Valerie's voice, tight with barely controlled panic, hissing something to her attorney I couldn't quite make out. Inside the courtroom, I took my seat at the defendant's table. Iris arranged her files with methodical precision. Valerie entered moments later, and I felt her eyes boring into the back of my head. She wanted me to turn around, to show some reaction, to give her something. I didn't. I just sat there, perfectly still, perfectly calm, and waited for the judge to enter. The game was about to begin, and for the first time in 6 months, Valerie had no idea what was coming. Valerie's lawyer came out swinging. She painted a picture of a marriage so toxic, so suffocating that I almost didn't recognize it as my own life. She talked about financial abuse, emotional manipulation, a husband who controlled every aspect of his wife's existence. And then Valerie took the stand, and I have to admit, she was good. She'd practiced this performance, refined it, perfected every trembling breath and strategic pause. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she described years of walking on eggshells, of having her spending monitored, of being made to feel small and worthless. She talked about finding the courage to leave, about Preston showing her what real partnership looked like. When she pointed at him in the gallery, her voice breaking with gratitude, I saw people in the courtroom nodding sympathetically. Even the court reporter looked moved. I sat perfectly still through all of it, taking notes, my expression neutral, and I could see it confused her. She kept glancing at me, expecting rage or tears or desperation. Instead, I just listened, occasionally leaning over to whisper something to Iris, who would nod and add to her own notes. The calmer I remained, the more animated Valerie became, embellishing her stories, adding details that grew increasingly dramatic. She was overselling it, getting comfortable, and I knew Iris saw it too. My lawyer had this slight smile playing at the corner of her mouth, like a chess player watching their opponent make exactly the wrong move. When Iris stood up for cross-examination, the temperature in the room shifted. She started gently asking Valerie to confirm specific dates when these alleged incidents of abuse occurred. Valerie rattled them off confidently, dates she'd clearly memorized, built into her narrative. Iris nodded thoughtfully, then calmly laid out my business travel records on the evidence table. On 3 of the dates Valerie had just described, I was in different states entirely. Confirmed by plane tickets, hotel receipts, client meeting logs, even photos time-stamped at conferences. I watched the color drain from Valerie's face. She stammered something about misremembering, about the abuse blending together, but the damage was done. Then Iris moved to the financial abuse claims. She projected our bank statements onto a screen, highlighted in yellow every transaction Valerie had made. Designer clothes, spa days, weekend trips with friends, Thousands of dollars spent without a single question from me. Iris even had text messages Valerie had sent to her sister, messages I'd pulled from her cloud backup. Nathan is such a doormat. I bought another bag and he didn't even notice. This is too easy. The courtroom went silent. Valerie tried to explain it away, but her voice had lost all its conviction. And then came the affair evidence. Iris presented photographs of Valerie and Preston together, but not recent ones. These were dated 8 months ago, 2 months before Valerie had even filed for divorce. Hotel check-ins, restaurant reservations. A weekend getaway to Napa Valley, charged to a credit card Preston didn't realize I could trace. Text messages between them started appearing on screen. Casual conversations about their future, about moving in together once she got rid of the dead weight. That's what she'd called me. Dead weight. I watched Preston sink lower in his seat, realizing his role in all this was about to become very public. But Iris wasn't done. She pulled out the laptop evidence, the conversations I'd found that started this whole thing, plans to maximize the settlement, strategies to paint me as abusive, screenshots of Valerie literally coaching her friends on what lies to tell if called to testify, and then the audio recording. Valerie's voice filled the courtroom, crystal clear, laughing as she told a friend, "By the time we're done in court, Nathan won't be able to show his face anywhere in this city. I'm going to destroy him." The silence that followed was deafening. I finally looked at Valerie. She was staring at me with something close to horror, and all I did was smile. The judge took a 15-minute recess, and those 15 minutes felt like an eternity. Valerie sat at her table, completely motionless, her face pale as paper. Preston had already slipped out of the courtroom, and I watched through the window as he practically ran to his car. So much for true love. Her lawyer was furiously whispering to her, but Valerie wasn't responding. She just stared straight ahead, the reality of what had just happened slowly sinking in. When the judge returned, her expression told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. She didn't hold back. Judge Morrison called Valerie's testimony a calculated deception and an abuse of the legal system. She talked about how false allegations of domestic abuse don't just harm the accused, they harm real victims who struggle to be believed. She mentioned the word perjury 3 times. And then came the verdict. Divorce granted on my terms. No alimony, no claim to the house. Every dollar Valerie had transferred out of our accounts in the months leading up to the filing had to be returned with interest. And she had to pay my legal fees, which, thanks to Iris's thoroughness, were substantial. The judge also recommended the district attorney's office review the case for possible criminal charges. Valerie made this sound, something between a gasp and a sob, and her whole body seemed to collapse in on itself. Outside the courthouse, chaos erupted. The journalist Valerie had invited was there, but she wasn't writing the puff piece about a brave woman's escape. She was documenting a spectacular public implosion. Within an hour, the story was everywhere. Woman's elaborate plot to destroy husband backfires in court. The audio clips, the text messages, screenshots of her planning my humiliation, all of it went viral. My phone started buzzing with messages from people who'd believed her lies, apologizing, asking how they could make it right. Friends I'd lost reached out. My boss called personally, sheepish and apologetic, mentioning something about a promotion we should discuss. Valerie's world disintegrated faster than she'd built it. Her PR firm issued a statement distancing themselves from her within 24 hours. The company she worked for let her go, citing the negative attention and breach of trust. Preston blocked her number and was spotted on dating apps before the week was out, telling anyone who'd listen that he'd been deceived and manipulated, painting himself as another victim of her schemes. Even her parents released a cold, formal statement about supporting truth and accountability. She went from having everything to having nothing in less than 72 hours. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. I'd taken that promotion, moved into a better place, started seeing someone new. Melissa was a graphic designer I'd met at a coffee shop, someone who knew my story but saw me for who I was now, not who I'd been. I'd started volunteering at a men's support group, helping other guys navigate divorce and false allegations. Using what I'd learned to protect people who didn't know they needed protecting, I'd even reconnected with old friends, built stronger relationships with my family. The man Valerie had tried to destroy didn't exist anymore, but not because she'd broken him, because I'd chosen to become something better. Then one afternoon, I ran into her at a coffee shop downtown. She was wearing retail store clothes, her hair pulled back simply, none of the designer polish she used to armor herself with. She saw me, and I watched her face cycle through shame, anger, and something that might have been regret. She approached slowly, asked if we could talk. I looked at her, this woman who'd once meant everything to me, who'd planned my destruction with such casual cruelty, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just indifference. "Valerie," I said calmly, "you didn't break me. You freed me. I hope you find whatever you're looking for." I walked away, met Melissa outside, and we headed to dinner. The last time I looked back, Valerie was still standing there, holding her cheap coffee, watching the life she could have had walk away, and I felt nothing but grateful.